First chapter posted June 26, 2013. At this time Season 3 was still airing on the Hub. As of October 28, 2021 there are over 215 chapters and almost 2.4 million words. Asterisk. MLP Time Loops. By Safrinith. This is a FIC based on the time loop files, the format of which was first codified by Inortal on fanfiction.net. The basic idea is, one character, the anchor, usually the main character of a fictional setting, is looping back to the very first moments of their parent series every time either they die or some kind of time limit expires. They of course end up monumentally stir-crazy given enough time. Eventually others start to loop as well. The reset is not always perfect. Sometimes a loop's history will be different to the prime loop, or canonical plot. Crossover or fusion loops also occur, randomly. These can involve the home loopers having a guest, or the anchor for one universe spending time in another, or replacements of one character by another. Vacation loops are where the anchor, or others, decides bucket and lets off steam by doing whatever comes to mind. There's little or no attempt to maintain the original timeline. Here's a brief guide. Asterisk. So you're time looping. A short guide, by Twilight Sparkle. Hello. Welcome to the wider universe. If you've just been given this short booklet, then either you're in a world you don't recognize, or someone you don't know is taking the place of someone you do. Don't worry, this is entirely normal, and you should be back to the world you're familiar with next time around. This booklet is intended to make you, the reader and newly contacted looper, familiar with the terms that more experienced loopers use. It will also let you know what you can expect in the future, and a little about why. Loop, noun. This is each individual instance that you go back in time. So on each occasion you wake up back in time, you're in a new loop. The term is also used to refer to separate worlds, so I, for example, am from the Equestria loop. Loops have a usual start point and a usual end point, but neither is guaranteed. Endpoints are more likely to be the same loop-to-loop than start points. Looping, verb. The process of going back in time, and the process of turning up in a new loop. So I occasionally loop into the world known as Burke, and I am said to be looping into Burke. I have looped in the past, I am a looper, you are also a looper. Yggdrasil, proper noun. Yggdrasil is the tree that is the multiverse. All loops are, to extend an analogy, branches of Yggdrasil. It has recently suffered severe damage, though the situation is contained. That's why the loops happen. Awake, adjective, verb. To be awake is to have memories of having gone back in time, that is, to have looped this time. Sometimes people awaken before or after the time that everyone else does. My friend Princess Celestia, for example, sometimes awakens nearly 1,000 years in the past from when I awaken. You have to be a looper to be awake, but not all loopers are awake every time. Anchor, noun. Almost every known loop has at least one anchor. The anchor is, one of, the first to start looping in a given loop. I am an anchor, for example. The anchor for a given loop is easy to work out. They're the one who's always awake. Well, almost always. They're the one who's able to be the only one awake. So, sometimes I'm awake and none of my friends are. The death of the last present anchor within a certain period tends to instantly end the loop. A looper intentionally causing this to end, crash, the loop early tends to land the perpetrator in a punishment loop. Sometimes beats the alternative of going along with a particularly awful loop, and the admins are understanding. Replace, verb. To take the place normally occupied by another individual, looping or not. This includes if you have swapped places with a friend, for example, though it is normally used when the place you are occupying is in another loop. Fused loop, noun. The term fused loop is somewhat fluid. The more general meaning is that it is any iteration of a loop where elements from more than one world looping or not are present. So, for example, a world where my world and yours were mixed together might mean that I'm there. It might mean that everyone was ponies. Or it might just mean that there's a few of my fellow equestrian loopers there, as humans. The more specific meaning is the middle one, where there are things other than loopers from both worlds. Or from all three, or more. Most loopers learn about the broader multiverse in one of their first fused loops. If you're reading this guide, you probably received it from someone in a fused loop. Feel free to stash a few copies in your subspace pocket, if you have one, to pass on the favor. Baseline, noun. The events of the first run-through of a loop, and the events that tend to result with no outside interference. If, for example, your home loop had none of its loopers awake, and I was a million light years away and never got any closer, the events back at your home region would be baseline. Variant, noun. A loop that varies from baseline independently from the influence of loopers. This could be as subtle as a friend of yours having slightly different tastes than they do in baseline, or as blatant as everyone in the world changing species or gender. Most variants are fairly benign, roll with them and enjoy the variety. Occasionally, you may encounter a variant loop that seems fundamentally wrong. Feel free to team up with anyone else awake and fix it, as decisively as necessary. Admin, noun. The admins are the deities who run Yggdrasil and who are working to fix it. If you meet them directly, there are a few things to remember. First, they spend a substantial fraction of their existences working to keep you alive, so allow for that. Second, they are essentially gods of a power beyond anything you have. Yes, that includes you. And third, they do care for the worlds they run, try to stay on their good side. It's just common courtesy. Hub, noun. A universe that includes fiction of most other universes. Only occurs via fused loops, the hub has no loopers. If you find yourself in the hub, you might want to take the opportunity to stock up on fiction, and to meet or interact with the authors of your own fictional universe. Fiction, noun. While not always the case, fiction is often descriptions of other universes, used as backups of those universes in others. Many older loopers have substantial collections of fiction, both for entertainment and as reference material in case they loop into those universes. Sakura syndrome, noun. Named after the unfortunate Sakura Harino, who was the first documented case. Loopers with a case of Sakura syndrome tend to focus on the fact that things are returned to their original state when a loop restarts, and begin to use this to their advantage. The stricter definition is that they begin behaving like this to fellow loopers who are not reset in this manner, while the less strict definition is simply that they exploit the loops to mistreat non-looping individuals. People with this problem tend to come about because they have become bored or apathetic as a result of the loops, and turn to one means or another to enjoy themselves. This becomes gradually more extreme over time. The process is not inevitable, but care should be taken. Sufferers of Sakura syndrome are unfortunate. They are also potentially dangerous, and as a new looper I cannot guarantee your safety near them. Setsuna syndrome, noun. The opposite of Sakura syndrome, named for Setsuna Mayu. This is the case when a looper comes to believe that the events of the baseline are sacrosanct and must not be interfered with. This is especially dangerous and risky, both for the sufferer and for others when they are not the only one awake. Sufferers of Setsuna syndrome may get violent to preserve what they see as the true timeline, and they can easily bite off more than they can chew. Setsuna syndrome, unlike Sakura syndrome, has a known and reliable solution in that it results from a simple misconception. Admins can help to talk sufferers around if other measures have not sufficed. Subspace pocket, noun. An ability most loopers eventually develop. This consists of setting up a storage space inside one's soul, into which objects may be placed. The size of the pocket grows with time and with your own personal discipline and power. These objects are carried between loops, which is of course very useful. Punishment loop, noun. You may have had one of these already. Don't worry, we all do. They're bland, often embarrassing, and unpleasant to be in. You tend not to have access to most of your normal abilities, and you probably ended up there after doing something stupid which backfired spectacularly. These are usually quite stable places, where you're put while the admins fix whatever you damaged. Just grin and bear it. Trying to end a punishment loop early doesn't end well. Vacation loop, noun. When a looper doesn't feel like playing along with the current loop, whether baseline or not, they may choose to take a break. If the loop would tend towards some horrific atrocity without intervention, it's frowned upon to not make some arrangements, but otherwise, loopers need a break once in a while. Icon, proper noun. The most common punishment loop. A horrifically bland high school setting, even by the standards of high school settings. Wish fulfillment fantasy for the protagonist, and you are not the protagonist. Generation, noun, adjective. Generations of loopers are essentially groups who started looping at about the same time. For example, I first started looping several thousand loops after the world of Burke, so I am technically from a younger generation than the Burke anchor, hiccup. But given how many loops there have been, we tend to be spoken of as being part of the same generation. First generation, noun. The loopers who started looping first. All anchors, all very powerful. Owing to calculation issues, they've all lost count. It is unclear whether there are 5 or 7. The broader definition is, Ranmasei Utdome, Shinji Ikari, Harry Potter, Naruto Uzumaki, Lina Inverse, Usagi Tsukino and Ichigo Kurosaki. Evidence exists that Ichigo is younger, but evidence that he is the same generation also exists. Usagi, meanwhile, appears to have pretended that her friend Rei was the anchor for a considerable time. Ping, noun, verb. A combination of several different types of abilities that only somebody who had been to multiple universes could perform. You send a ping when you want to know if anybody else is awake, and they, usually, ping back. However, you usually can't identify the source of a ping. Some loops, such as my own, might have other ways of identifying awake individuals. As with the subspace pocket, you might want to ask the person who gave you this pamphlet about how to do this. Stealth anchor, noun. Some loopers prefer to hide themselves from other loopers. In the rare case where a fused loop is almost identical to the baseline of one loop, the anchor for that loop is not awake, and the anchor from the other loop stays hidden. This second anchor is known as a stealth anchor. This results in what appears to be a loop in which the anchor is not awake, which is otherwise impossible. Expansion, noun. If you notice a string of loops with a particular variant, or loops that start earlier or end later than usual, you've likely had an expansion. Expansions occur when the hub backups of a loop are added to. As the fiction backup adds more to its story, so too will its respective loop expand. This can cause loops to last longer, and bring in new events to the baseline, add more details that were previously unknown, or reveal events that were previously not contained within the loop's story. For example, many of my fellow equestrian loopers began looping with little to no knowledge of their parents, myself included. Over the course of the loops, however, we have had details about who they are, what they look like, and what they are like become baseline information. I hope that this booklet was helpful. If you ever find yourself in Equestria, then drop by for a chat. My name is Twilight Sparkle. I tend to be a unicorn and live in a library tree, and the secret code phrase is "Hi, I'm a visiting looper." I'd like to hear if there's anything that should be added to this booklet. Good luck!